Hi everyone, and thanks for joining today's webinar, which is all about getting your content online. My name's Trevor Fairweather. I'm the General Manager at VETTrack, part of the ReadyTech group. Today I'm really excited to be joined by Kerri Buttery from VETNexus and the VET Gurus on a really critically important subject of getting your content online. Many of you would know that Kerri is an e-learning expert and advocate and works closely with many RTOs when thinking about how they can move their learning content online. Like yesterday, I'm running the webinar from home, so hopefully you won't hear any background noise from the kids. I'm sure many of you are in that situation as well. And like many of our webinars, we also design it to be pretty interactive. So you'll notice a Q&A panel in your webinar. So please, any questions that you have throughout the webinar, please ask them, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A section at the end. For those of you that didn't join yesterday's webinar, I just wanted to quickly touch on our current situation. From a ReadyTech perspective, we recognise that some of our clients and the sector is doing it pretty tough at the moment, and we just wanted to say that we're here to help. We've launched our remote control initiative, which is really here to help you move your workforce to be able to operate remotely, as well as try and establish some control when you do it. Today is the second in a series of our webinars. We'll also later today be launching a microsite, which will have access to a whole raft of resources, content, as well as wellbeing information. We'd like to share some of the things that we're doing at ReadyTech, particularly around how we're working with our teams that are feeling somewhat isolated, and how you can get involved and how your teams can also participate and feel that sense of connection. So we're really here to help try and navigate through this difficult period. Enough from me, and with that said, today's session is all about you and how you get your learning content online. And how you do that quickly, and ensuring that you tick all of the compliance boxes. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Kerri, who'll be running most of today's session.
Hi, Trevor. How are you?
I'm well, Kerri. How are you?
Good. It won't let me start my video because it says that the host has stopped it.
Oh, okay.
So I'll have to get you to get that one going for me.
Let's see if I can make that happen.
Joys of online learning, hey?
That's it. I've made you the host. Can you see if that works now?
There we go. Thank you.
Cool.
It wasn't letting me do that myself. Excellent. So I will also share my screen now. And here we go. Okay, just making sure I've shared the right screen. It's the webinar front page of tips for rapid transition to online learning in VET. Is the one you're seeing?
Perfect, yeah.
Excellent. Yes, it's tricky, and that's one of the tips that I go through a little bit later, making sure that you've shared the right screen, so you're not sharing the one that's got your email or other things up that might be showing private information. So yes, that's definitely one of the things to be careful of. Thanks for the intro, Trevor. I'll head through information today around this rapid transition that we're all working through at the moment. And Trevor was talking to me about this last week, just in terms of how RTOs at the moment, there are so many things that you're having to do and to grapple with in terms of moving from a face-to-face environment to online, the compliance side of things, communicating with students. There's all these different things that you're having to do at the moment. And I think everyone's focusing on that. Let's get it online for now so that we can continue doing things. And that's really important to do. But we do have to think about some of those compliance requirements at the same time. And ASQA have been communicating information around, we've got the option at the moment of putting an RTO status in hibernation if needed. Hopefully you'll all be able to move forward with other things in terms of keeping things moving. However, if you're in that situation, then that's something that you can look at. Now, I encourage you to type in the chat throughout the session. As Trevor said, the Q&A, so if you've got specific questions, type them in the Q&A and then we'll go through them a little bit later as well. But happy for interaction on the chat, and there'll even be spots where I get you to type in the chat. What I'm talking about today is going to be around what do we need to do now, or what can we do right now to meet this current demand and take a little bit of the stress away as well. How can we turn this into a long-term strategy? Because there's been a lot of RTOs that have sort of been thinking, you know, maybe we should move online, or what could we do to move online a little bit, or dabbling in that area, and now it's just bam, you've got to do things online to be able to survive. So how can we use this as a long-term strategy for the RTO so that by the time we come out of this, hopefully only 6 months, we've got something that's there for the long term and that actually improves the processes within our RTOs. And finally, compliance considerations, but I'll also talk about those along the way, and we'll finish up on our questions. So in terms of meeting our current demands, at the moment, we're faced with this urgent versus important. And it's that battle that we've always got. You know, we've always got urgent things that need to be done straight away. Sometimes they're important, sometimes they're not. So what we need to do right now is we've got so many things that are urgent and important. We need to look at, well, how can we do those in a way that's going to streamline things? How can we do those urgent and important things in a way that's going to be of benefit in the long term? And where can we actually do things that we can delegate to other people, and how can we share that load within our teams or with other people that we can bring in to help? One of the suggestions around delivering training online that came up in a webinar that I did the other day, when I was going through all the things to think about while you're delivering, one of the people said, it'd be really good if we didn't have to worry about what was coming up in the chat, or we didn't have to worry about, some of these other things, and we could just focus on what we were doing as the teacher. And that was a really good point. And that's exactly what we're doing today. Trevor's looking after the technical side and running the session behind the scenes. And, if you've got questions like I can't hear anything or the slides have disappeared, he'll respond to all of that in the chat, and I don't have to worry about that or be distracted by that. So that's a way that you can sort of send that information to someone else to process while you concentrate on what it is that you're teaching. So it's a way of working together. If you've got two trainers teaching the same qualification, maybe you're bringing your students from both groups together and you share that load of one person delivering while the other person is facilitating behind the scenes and answering the chat questions that come up and those sorts of things. And just taking the scariness out a little bit, because you don't have to think about absolutely everything that you're doing at the same time. It does take quite a while to get used to running the whole thing, doing the technical setup, following the chat, being across it all. It takes a long time to get that down pat. So having that extra person there really, really helps. You might even be able to, divide up some of the workload as well. If maybe you've got 3 people delivering the same qualification, and you might be able to go through, well, I'll do this unit, you do that unit, you do that unit. We'll record some videos. I just know that all my school teacher friends at the moment are madly recording videos and saying that they're going to be putting these videos up for students to watch with them delivering content. And that's one of the ways that we can approach this. If you've got other people working with you, divide and conquer, share it up, because there is so much here that's important and urgent. Okay, so time to type in the chat. It's good to see we've got a few coming in there. So Eve and Heather have made a few comments already. It's a really good matrix, isn't it, Eve? I like that. The matrix of, well, these are things that you need to focus on now, and these are the things that are going to be later, but you need to make sure at some stage you get to the later. So could you type in the chat, what end of the scale are you on at the moment? So we've got a few images there on the screen. Guy in the top left, he's okay, he's fine, we'll get this done. I love being online. Then there's the, yeah, I'll do what I've got to do, through to the tantrum and pulling your hair out. So whereabouts are you sitting at the moment? So Mark's red tie guy, yeah, good. So if you're going, okay, Heather loves being online, Shannon's unsure, Taylor, somewhere between bottom left and bottom right. I think there's quite a few people in that same situation. There we go, a few coming through now. We are going really well, so top left, good. And this is the thing, there's going to be a huge range. Someone else has just said, one of us bottom right, another top right. Craig has said that. Janine said, still getting your head around it because you have so many trainers. And that's where you need to get in there and do up a plan of who's going to be doing what to divide that work out so that you're not having people repeating what someone else is doing. Try and make the most of it so that you're managing the time of people and come up with a plan of, okay, you're going to do online facilitation for this unit while you're over here creating other things for people to do and collecting resources for people. So it's about taking a bit of a strategic approach to that. Kelly is pulling hair out, lady. And yeah, lots and lots of people. I get phone calls every day from people who are in that bottom right, looking at help with, you know, how can we make this easier? And it's going to be a big process. And hopefully we'll get from the bottom row and get you sort of moving up to red tie guy, and then the guy that is actually okay. Allison's saying maybe all four. And I think at different times of the day, I'm probably experiencing all four of those at different times of the day. And I'm sure that many of you would be. For me, the hardest part is having a child home while I'm working. I'm lucky that he's old enough that he can occupy himself for bits at a time. But I think, like Trevor said before, you might hear kids in the background. That might happen here because we've got those constant interruptions as well, which is actually what's putting me on the bottom row sometimes, those interruptions. So we need to try and get from that bottom row up to the top row and relieve the stress. And like Lisa says, forcing you to rethink how we're doing business and how we can actually make this as an advantage in the long term. So how are we going to approach this? Initially, we're going to be on that left-hand side. We're going to get it up. We're going to get training up there. We're going to get things happening. It might not be the best. It might not be, you know, ideally what we want to have there long term, but we can only do what we can do in the hours that we have. I think if you've got a team, you're in a good position to be able to look at that and how we can work at dividing work up so that we've got different people doing different things rather than everyone trying to do the same thing. Don't have everyone creating videos on the same topic, or don't have everyone doing an online lesson where they're sitting there all day on video with their class doing the same things that you've got someone else sitting and doing at the same time. Work out how you can divide that up. So we're just going to get it up initially, and I'll go through the stages. Then once you've implemented and you've actually got something up, once it's been running, we go back and evaluate and reflect. And okay, this has worked well with our students, this hasn't. How are we going to make this changes, improve it? And then I would say actually go through and start to build a more quality program based on your experiences so far. Now, there's a whole lot of different RTOs that try to go online. And often they try to do a plug and play approach where they go, we're going to buy this SCORM package off the shelf and we're going to put that on a learning management system, and then we're going to put our learners through online. And that's one way of approaching it. But in my opinion, that's not the best way, because every RTO is different. And this is why when you buy assessments, you're going to contextualize your assessments to suit your RTO, to suit your students. And you're not just going to use exactly what you've bought off the shelf. And the same comes to online learning. What works for your RTO might not work exactly the same way as it will for someone else. So this is actually giving you an exploratory approach to how it's going to work for you. And if you focus on just getting things up, as I said, we'll go through that, and then look at what's worked and what hasn't, it's going to give you an idea of what your students like. And that will help you build a program that's going to actually work for your particular RTO. Now, a lot of places are just going, and this is my recommendation for the first stage, is let's have sessions. People aren't even calling them video sessions or video classes or anything. Everyone's just calling them Zooms or Zoom sessions because so many people have gone with Zoom, and it's sort of becoming the brand name that's associated with the activity, like we've had so many times before in different areas. So in terms of running those online sessions, live sessions like we're doing now, a few different tips for you. I've put together 2 documents that Trevor's going to make available to you. One of them is the tips for delivering webinars. And then the other one is a checklist before you go online. Things like have a headset. It does make a big difference for a couple of reasons. It's going to stop any echo. So some computers are really good, and when someone else is speaking, it's not going to give you this sound loop that goes on. However, when you've got a class of students, and if you go down the virtual classroom path where you've actually got 20 students with their cameras on and everyone's going to have their turn to speak, you can get this sound loop going and echoing in the background. Having a headset stops that. And that's why I always use a headset, just in case someone else needs to speak, especially if you're having meetings. You'll notice that that sound loop is there. Having a headset gets rid of that. If you can find one. At the moment, the expensive ones are available, all the cheaper ones have sold out. But you might have something around the house. So if you've got mobile phone and you use a set of these when you're having a phone call, oftentimes, well, this one won't, but you can get an adapter to plug in from an iPhone to a computer jack. But the older ones, and I've got quite a few older headsets around the house with the old style plug-in, you can use those as your headset, that's fine. And that will improve the quality. It'll stop any background echoing as well. Camera, it's up to you. I find that it's easier for people to engage if you're on camera rather than just looking at a screen, especially if you've got the same images on the screen at the same time. Bandwidth, if you're having trouble, and my father-in-law sent me a message this morning saying our lecture got cancelled yesterday. He's going through U3A. The lecture got cancelled because the lecturer's Zoom was glitching in and out and his internet wasn't good enough. I said, plug it in. Go old style, don't use Wi-Fi, plug the computer into the modem. That improves your reception. Well, you don't need reception, it's going through the wire. So it actually gives you better quality. So if you're having problems there, plug in if you've got an Ethernet cable rather than relying on Wi-Fi. With the background, I've seen a few comments, and I had someone say this the other day on my webinar, that they're liking seeing dogs in the background or, you know, the kids making an appearance on camera, and that's all fine. You just need to be careful that you don't have any really embarrassing situations occur. I would say it'd be better to have your back to a wall rather than your lounge room where chaos may break out possibly. In a room would be even better where you can close the door, which is what I've done here, and put a no entry sign on the door. But if you're happy enough to be out in the main part of your house, I'd say try to have your back against a wall just so that nothing, someone else doesn't walk past heading to the shower or something like that and they don't have clothes on. You don't want that to happen. You don't want to end up online with an embarrassing video. The BBC guy, yeah, he was okay when the kids came in because that's just the wife coming in and pulling them out, but that's okay. You don't want anything worse than that though. Make the most of your online time in terms of having discussions and different things that you're going to do with students online. If you've got videos for them to watch, get them to watch it beforehand, before they come on. If you've got things you want them to read, get them to do that beforehand. Try and make your online time interactive. Again, that depends how many students you've got. So we've got a really big group here today. We've got, close to the 3 figures. So it's not really something that can be hugely interactive other than using the chat and the Q&A. If you've got a smaller group and you want to make it interactive, you can have discussions going constantly, different people being unmuted. So make the most of that online time. And then, external tools and a few different opportunities to interact. So I could talk about all of those things for an hour, but I'll keep moving so that we can get onto your long-term strategy. and also talking about what we're going to do as stage 1. And this is stage 1. This is where you are now. How do you get things moving? And I would say webinar platform. If you don't have an LMS, and I might get, have we got hands up on this particular? Yes, we do. If you can raise your hand, if you do have a learning management system, an LMS, that'll just give me a good idea of where people are at. Okay, I'm getting a lot of hands up, but there's a lot not. I reckon that looks like about a third. A few more going up. Yeah, it looks like about a third of you have got a learning management system. So that means that 2/3 of you don't. If you do, that's really good, and you're probably going to be on the next stage rather than on this stage. If you don't have a learning management system, the key things are to have a webinar platform and cloud storage. You can then put things in cloud storage, so Dropbox, Google Drive, whatever else that you might use, OneDrive, SharePoint, and you could even create individual folders for students that have restricted access, so only that student can access that folder, so it's a shared folder with them or a place that they can save things to. You can disseminate information via that cloud storage where they can download files, and that might be their assessments or their learner guides, and then they can upload their assessment in that secure folder that no one else has access to. And then you have a webinar platform. So it might be Zoom. There's quite a few good ones out there. I'm using Big Marker at the moment and I really like it. Might be Microsoft Teams if you've got a smaller group, Google Hangouts, a whole lot of different webinar platforms that are all promoting themselves at the moment. If you Google top 10 webinar platforms, there is an article that will come up and it will give you the top 10 and the reasons to use them or not use them. My favorite one's not on there, but having used quite a few over the years, Big Marker is actually a really good one that I like at the moment. So that's your stage 1 if you don't have a learning management system. This is how you get it going very quickly, and then using your emails. You just need to make sure that if you're going with that cloud storage option, that students submitting assessment via their folder is that no other students can access that folder and that they can't access any other student's folder. You've got that one place where they're going to submit their assessment. And then you need to be very diligent in terms of retrieving that assessment. Don't mark it and leave it there. It's not your storage space, it's a transfer space. It's a space where they will upload their assessment to you, and then you will go and take that out of there to be marked and save that elsewhere, because you don't want students going and deleting their completed assessment. That's your evidence that you need to retain for 6 months. So that's if you've gone from a very face-to-face based approach where you've got workbooks in class that they're filling out or they're doing, then they're submitting to you in hard copy. That's your first way of moving forward. Kathleen's just noted there, VETtrack allows for the submission of assessments. Yes, I've been working with a client that actually has been using that for a lot of their assessments as well. So if you've got that option with what you're using, I might get Trevor to talk about that in the Q&A bit around how you can submit assessment, then that's going to be a really good option for you as well. Apart from going through that cloud storage, this might be a better one because it's going to then keep that there with your students' work, especially if it's PDF or a document. Otherwise, it would be videos, and I think that's going to be a lot of what people are doing as well, are videos. So I'd have to leave that to Trevor to tell you whether that can be done there or not. Did you want to jump in with that now, Trevor?
Yeah, thanks.
Oops, I've lost Trevor. Can anyone else hear? Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, sorry, it just sort of glitched for a minute.
Sorry. Yeah, within the student portal of VETtrack, you can upload various different types of documents. You can provide links to videos, that sort of thing. And then students can also upload assessment materials there as well. So if you're looking for that basic sort of place where you can upload documents and share with students. You can use that via VETtrack.
Excellent. And that's a very good point, because that might take away the need for that cloud storage. And then it attaches it to that student's file. Some of you may already be doing that in terms of your storage for your students' work, and maybe it's that you can set it up that they will be the ones directly uploading there now. So stage one, you're going to be using your existing materials. So you might still just have your PDF learner guide that you can give to people. And while that's online learning, because we're transmitting this all online, this is not what we would call great e-learning. So we've got a few stages to work through there. But at this stage, it's a way of using a repository-based system where you're getting information to students and you're getting information back, and then using that webinar platform to deliver some online sessions. Okay, that's the first part where you're going to possibly go to make this work. Stage two then. This is where you need to start looking at a long-term plan and think about where you're going to be 6 months from now. And are you going to want to keep all of this online? Are you going to want to make use of what you've created in this time? And if you think, yes, let's do that, let's turn this into how we're going to be communicating with students in the future, even though we go back to face-to-face classes, how are we going to provide all of that other information and support to students? If you're going to want to use this or create this, why not keep it there as your long-term resource that you've created for your students if you're going to put all that work into it now? So stage two is thinking about that long-term plan and start to investigate learning management systems. And we've got a webinar next week which is going to look at different systems that you could be looking at, just to provide general information. So have a look at that session if you need to investigate learning management systems. And this is when you're going to start reviewing your materials to check, is there anything that we need to go and start creating? Is there anything that we could make interactive? So things like, okay, we've got a learner guide. That learner guide's 60 pages long or 80 pages long. How can we make this more interesting online? And that might be going through and looking at areas where, well, we could create, we've presented a case study here. We could change that case study to be a video that they watch. And there's some really good video tools that can be used in terms of creating cartoon videos, or even getting, you know, it's a bit hard to get 2 people in the room or 3 people in the room. You can't really do that now to create a live video. But even if it's someone doing a voiceover of different pictures that you find online. So there's tools like Adobe Spark, Powtoon, Beyond. There's a whole lot of different tools there as well, where you can create videos. And actually, I haven't given it to Trevor as a resource, but I might add another one that I'll send through, which is a list of my top 10 online tools for online learning. And they're different ones that will help you go and create videos that you can use. So reviewing your materials, seeing what you can do as a video, what you could do as an online discussion. And one of the things that I really like for online discussions is if you don't have a lot of resources in one area, so maybe you want good videos related to workplace health and safety in a construction context, and you're finding that a lot of the ones that you've found aren't that great, make it a task for the students, make it a discussion forum task. And if you've actually got an LMS, you can set it so that they can't see what anyone else has shared until they go and put their own in. But if you don't, it might be a shared document that's in OneDrive or Dropbox, whatever, that they can go and put their link in. And they've got to say who typed it in. You can usually look at revision history. So like Google Docs, it'll tell you who put what in. Then they set it as a task. Go and find 2 resources for workplace health and safety in the construction industry. And they can't be what anyone else has already shared. And off you go. And before you know it, if you've got 30 students, you've got 60 resources related to that topic that they've all shared, that they've found online. And then you can use that to start to build your future material in terms of what they've shared with you. Now, you could refer students to go and watch particular videos if you then go through them. I think this one's good, this one's good. You can use tools like Edpuzzle So Edpuzzle is another really good one that allows you to get a video that's on YouTube and put a quiz over the top, a quiz overlay. And there's a few different tools that allow you to do that, but I find Edpuzzle is a good one and it's free. And you can then see how students are going, answering those questions along the way. So looking at your materials and thinking, where can I go and make this more interactive and more interesting for my students, so that when you then go to put it onto an LMS, you've got your plan. And that's when we get to stage 3. That's when we're going to migrate our learning materials. And I would start with your learning materials first, because that's then going to ease your workload. If in stage 1, you are doing webinars and different videos that you're creating for students, these can then be put onto your learning management system for students to watch in the next group. So reuse them. Videos can be chopped up. So if you have a 1-hour session, so for example, this particular session that we're doing, I had 4 key things on the agenda. So 3 main areas and then questions. I can then break up the webinar or the video into 3 different parts. And that could be 3 different videos or sections on the website or on the LMS that students can go and watch. And I can ask questions about the video, or I could have other activities that they do about what was covered in that video. So take what you're doing at the moment, make sure you save any recordings, record everything. Then you can use different tools to chop out that recording and just keep the bits that you want to reuse. So it's about being smart in terms of reusing them. Don't worry if they're not perfect in terms of professional presentation or anything like that. It's more about the content and making sure that the information that's being presented is going to be useful. Doesn't matter if you haven't got fancy things flying in and branding, all that sort of stuff. Worry about that later. Just keep those so that you can chop them up. Places like YouTube, and there's another one through Google, I can't remember exactly where, but if you do a live webcast from Google, it will do live captioning for you, because that's the other thing that we need to think about in terms of using a lot of video recordings is accessibility. And if you've got students with any hearing impairments, you need to make sure your resources are accessible. And I think compliance-wise, this is probably going to be one of the biggest areas for you to be considering, is how you are making sure that all students have access to your resources that you're using. And if you are relying on a lot of videos and you're just putting video, how are they going to access that? So you need to do captions, making sure that then they can follow that. And that's why it's important to mix things up a little bit as well, so that it's not all videos, but you might have other resources where they're going and reading things, or coming onto chat groups where they're typing and sharing with each other. So tips here for stage 3 to get this online into an LMS, once you've chosen an LMS, is use everything that you've already done through this stage 1 and gotten it up. The next stage is to migrate your assessment tools online. So up till now, you've probably just used your same assessment tools that you were using. That might have been, written assessments, and you might have done that in the same way, and they're just submitting Word documents with their assessments, and that's fine. It can get easier once you've got an LMS to migrate across to some things might be auto-marked. So we've got an LMS will usually have ways of having multiple choice questions. Avoid true and false, because that's a 50-50 chance that they're going to get it right. Hotspot questions, categorizing, those sorts of things are different question types in the LMS. And when you're looking for an LMS, make sure that the quizzing tool gives you lots of options. Don't just go for one that's just got multiple choice. Make sure it's got file uploads, single choice, multiple choice, categorizing, matching, maybe hotspot, those sorts of things as your assessment. So that gives you more flexibility. Otherwise, you'll find that you're always just uploading and downloading documents anyway. You need to make sure that it's got the file upload option, because One of the ways we'll be moving over the next 6 months with assessment is a lot of reliance on video evidence. And I will go and talk specifically around practical assessment shortly. Then stage 5 is review and evaluate. And this is an ongoing process. You know, nothing's ever perfect. We are going to have review cycles. This particular process going online from being paper-based, this first round of review and evaluate is going to be a big one because you're learning on the go. You're rapidly implementing, you're getting up what you need to get up, and then you'll come back and you'll go, oh, those first videos weren't very good, let's redo them. Or, geez, there's a lot of text for students to read here, let's see how we can make that more interactive. And by interactive, by the way, I don't mean click to reveal. There's a lot of reliance on click to reveal. And by that, I mean packages where you've got an image that comes up and it's got a box and it says, to find out more information, click here. And you click there. And then the next one, find out more, click here. And it's more about clicks than actual learning. So by interactivity, I mean things like drag and drop the words, or matching pictures and images together, or looking for fill in the gaps type activities. So there's a whole range of things that you can do that aren't just click to reveal. Try and avoid that if you can and look for these more interactive methods. But that's getting further on into the long-term strategy. That's not something that you need to be worrying about right now in terms of getting stuff up there. Students are going to realise that for now, they need to deal with, okay, I've got to read a lot or I've got to watch a lot of videos, as long as you've got those captions. Just to get some feedback from you in terms of a long-term strategy, how many of you, I might just do a hands up and then type in if you've got any other comments that you want to add to it or where you might be in a journey already. Do you think your RTO will move to online learning long term? I think I need a drink. I need some caffeine. Excuse me for a minute. So we've got quite a few hands going up. Kathy said that they've already been doing things online as a support tool. And that's a really good point in terms of all the things that you're doing now. Even if you get, past this 6 months and you think, no, we are face-to-face, maybe you've got international students and you can't do things online, you can still use this as support material. And it's just a matter of then keeping on top of things. If you've had a unit change, well, maybe you've got to go and update the support material for that unit. But it's about providing something extra. It's going to give you value add, things that you didn't have before, backups. What if a trainer's sick and you have to cancel something? You've got something to refer your students to go to. So some have said no. Wade said we'll use it as part of a full strategy. And I think that's a really good idea for RTOs to be thinking about, or we've had someone say not an RTO. So for your organisation to think about is, what's our long-term strategy? Because this has really flipped things around for some organisations. And long-term, how are you going to make sure that you'd survive if something like this was to happen again? Even that's like a 1 in 100 years type thing. But how are you going to try and future-proof? Because we've been talking about jobs of the future. Jobs of the future all of a sudden have all changed. We have to see what we're preparing students for over the next couple of years now, and that's all going to be different with all of this happening. We've got comments, yes, partly, but a lot of our courses are around hands-on and practice and demonstrating competency, so half-half. And Justine, I really like the half-half. My favourite approach is the blended approach. And I think with any course, you can go with a blended approach, because you can provide things online that students can do as preparation for coming to class, and they can see what content they might need to be covering off on, or give them some of the basics or some basic understanding before they then come, and then you're putting things into practice. And then maybe there's some follow-up things that they do online as well. So I think half-half, if you're a really hands-on area, is a great way to go. It's a good way to think about it, and it gets the knowledge transfer. So something that has been talked about for years around one of the gentlemen I know, John Dwyer, so much in his head, and he's now 86 or 87, and it's how do we get all of that knowledge out of his head and into something else. So last year, well, a few years ago now, I did a whole range of interviews with him that were recorded, and there've been a few different things to try and get some of this knowledge out of his head. And while you're in a space where you've got your trainers will have their trainer guides and they'll have all the different things and make sure we've got consistent delivery, there's still going to be a lot of information in their heads that hasn't been put down. Stories, anecdotes, get them creating case studies that can be shared with students as videos online. Just looking at a few of the other comments, really keen to go online as a long-term plan. Want to know how to implement this to VETtrack? Well, I'll have to leave that to Trevor to talk to you about a lot. Been surprised at how well young people with an intellectual disability responded to a Zoom online session. Yeah, I think young people generally do respond quite well to being online. They love the video. And even older people. Before all this happened, I was with my grandmother who's in her 80s, and for Christmas she couldn't see my auntie and uncle because they were down in Canberra, and I got out my phone and did a FaceTime with them. She couldn't believe it. She loved it, and now she keeps wanting to make FaceTime calls. Can't see her anymore because of keeping her isolated, but she goes, oh, can we go and do that video thing again? So I think people are really engaged with it at the moment. It will become second nature to us because that's how things are going to work over the next 6 months or so. What's going to be the trick is keeping people engaged. It's a novelty right now, and we need to be able to keep them engaged. And that's why I think initially, if we're focusing on these Zoom sessions or online sessions, that at some stage is going to get tiresome, and we're going to have to be able to have resources for students to use that does not require them to come on and listen to their teacher talk for an hour or all those sorts of things. So keep the sessions shorter. We're doing this as an hour session, but I would be saying with your students, maybe they're half-hour catch-ups, more regular half-hour catch-ups to keep it shorter because the attention span will be lost. If you're creating videos, keep them short, 2-3 minutes. Keep the topics short because they'll get to a point where they won't want to do it anymore, and if it's short, they'll go away and then they'll come back. So chunk it right down, and that's one of the things with online learning is keep it in manageable chunks. So consider that when you're taking it from your face-to-face. Lydia said it's an enterprise RTO, a lot of training and assessments on the job. We do some online learning modules, but that's it, yeah. And it might be that some of your assessment gets moved online, but some of it still needs to remain on the job. And I'll come back and read some of those comments a little bit later. I'm just going to keep moving through our compliance considerations for now. Now, first thing to think about, and there might be other things, and I invite you, after I've gone through these 4 slides, I invite you to go and put in feedback around anything that you've thought of in terms of compliance considerations as well, because this, one of my favorite things is social learning, and there's only so much you know yourself, and sometimes it takes other people to suggest things for that bubble to grow. So please go ahead and suggest things in the chat that you might be able to add to what I'm putting here. So the first thing, and this has been talked about a fair bit, is student consent for video recordings. If you're going to be keeping those video recordings of students, you should be making sure that you've got that consent. You might have already done that as part of your enrolment already, but if you are fully face-to-face, you might not have included that anywhere. So it might be a case of seeking additional consent for those recordings. Think about your student declarations and how you're gathering that in terms of, this is my own work, I've not copied from anyone else, making sure it's authentic. Because you're going to be relying more on online submissions, how are you going to make sure that it is the student's own work? And you might even just have a short interview conversation with the student once you've marked their work, just to go over things and ask them questions, just as a double check to make sure, yep, this was actually their own work. Security of submission, making sure that if it's a Dropbox, that it's only accessible to them. if you're using something like VetTrack, that they'll be logging in and submitting that, and that's good. We've just got to make sure that we've got security around that so that other people aren't able to access that. They can't access other students' assessment, etc. So that's something to be thinking about. And you might want to have a look at your training and assessment strategy and see if it needs to be juggled around a little bit. And you need to review that TAS, because for some of you, especially how we've got comments here around you're doing a lot of on-the-job assessment, you might be doing aged care at the moment and you might not have students in placements. And so you might need to be moving the practical assessment for down the track and do more of the theory work now. It might mean that their course gets stretched out longer than what you had intended it to be because they've got practical work to submit. So you might need to be looking at your TAS and changing around how you do that. Now, the practical skills assessment. For some of you, this won't be too difficult. So if you're delivering financial services, then a lot of this might be quite fine, because the observations sometimes are limited to things like oral communication skills or a few other basic practical skills that you can observe through an interview situation. However, others, such as fitness, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because they actually need to run training programs and coaching sessions that you need to observe. So for those ones where it's quite practical and you're not going to be able to do it without them having a group of people, then it's going to be a little bit different in terms of your training and assessment strategy. You're going to need to juggle things around to move that later down the track, or get very, very creative in how you might be able to conduct assessments. So maybe if it's fitness, maybe they're doing online fitness training, because I know that friends of mine are running yoga classes online. One of my friends is a Zumba instructor and she's got her Zumba classes running online. So it might be that you get very creative with how you're using that online setting to see, you know, it might be a three-way video meeting where you can see what the client is doing in the fitness situation. You can see what the trainer is doing, and then you as the assessor can make a judgment on that. Now, with those sort of situations, again, make sure you've got permission from anyone to record. And don't forget, now I've seen this more and more, people going, oh yeah, we video recorded that, so that's our evidence and we're just going to leave that and yeah, we're ticked. You must have your decision-making tool. It's the same as doing a face-to-face observation. Just because you've got a video doesn't mean that it's met all the requirements. It doesn't mean that they did things in the right order. It doesn't mean that you didn't give feedback on a particular area. So you must use that decision-making tool, like your observation checklist, to show how you've come to the decision that the performance was satisfactory. So the same as if this was a normal face-to-face observation. Give them their instructions clearly, set out what the resources are that need to be followed. Anything in terms of what you would do in a normal setting, you still need to do. It's just that it's going to be on camera rather than in the same room. So think about it that way. And think about all of your assessment in those same guidelines, that this is going to be like we were doing it in the same room, but we're doing it online. So I would normally tell them all these different things. I would normally make sure that they understood about plagiarism and those sorts of things. So put all of those instructions in. Make sure you're using your decision-making tools. If they're doing a portfolio, you still need to have your checklist that you'd be marking off. Remember to type in your questions in the Q&A if you've got any. Now, theory assessment. Think about your question types that you're asking students and the auto marking process. I mentioned before multiple choice. If you're asking multiple choice questions, and maybe you already are, then if you get an LMS, that can go online. But think about the way the questions are being asked. And so this is, whether it's online or not online, if you're using multiple choice questions, don't make it obvious what the answer is. Make it so that the student has to really think about what options have been presented to them, and make it difficult. When I did my IT degree and my accounting subjects, the multiple choice questions that we had were extraordinarily hard. So multiple choice can be difficult. Just don't make it obvious what the answer is, and make sure that the students are giving you a demonstration that they know what they are supposed to know. I would steer away, as I mentioned earlier, from true and false, because that's a 50-50. And if you've got this as an online assessment and they go through a quiz and it gives them a result, and you had a whole bunch of true false questions, well, they go back in and they just give the other answer. It doesn't mean that they know what they are. And that's like with multiple choice. Don't just have 3 options, because it, stretch it out more, at least 4, so that it's a bit harder in terms of being able to go and repeat the test. Some LMSs actually let you have amount of time between retaking the test. It might say that they can't do it on the same day, and that if they're going to come back and do it again, it might be a week later or a day later, whatever you decide. And again, security of their work, making sure that if it's not via an LMS and they're uploading their theory, that it is only accessible from the trainers or assessors, and that it's removed from that shared folder or wherever it might be sitting, so that you've got a secure copy of the assessment. And if you are then going to give a copy back to the student for them to see, then it's only going to be done in a way that you're not going to lose that original copy. So in overall, there's not much change here. You'd still be giving all your normal instructions. You just need to be careful of those question types that you're asking of students. And actually, I'm going to go back. Most LMSs will let you have a file upload when it comes to your theory. So if it makes it easier for you, you can stick to what you're already using and make it a file upload. They download their booklet that they've got to fill all the questions out, and then they can upload it. And that might reduce workload for now, because you've got to get this up fast. In terms of record keeping, you need to have pretty robust processes when everyone's working remotely. Make sure that you've got clear communication channels. Make sure that you've established what the process is going to be to get the results from the student work through to the student management system. Now, if you already have a learning management system, then you might have that fully integrated with VetTrack or JobReady, and it might already be automatically sending those results through, and we're all set. It'll run through. And so you've just got to make sure that the decisions that are being made in your learning management system are accurate, so that when it heads through and is automatically recorded in the student management system, that's all right, and that there's processes to check that at that end. But if you are going with more of a manual process and you've got students uploading things, then you need to make sure that you've got that checking process, communication process in place that needs to be established, so that you don't have mistakes happening and issuing certificates when they shouldn't be. So that's going to be a key for all the operations of your RTO, not just in relation to your online materials and your assessments, but the RTO needs to go back and have a look. Okay, so how are we going to make sure that we've got good communication channels? What are we implementing? Are we using Workplace by Facebook as a chat tool, or are we using Slack, or are we using Teams? What are you going to do, and what are the expectations? So that's a broader topic for coverage. Paul said, should students get assessment materials before the webinar? So if you're doing a practical and you're doing that online, I'll just go back to that one. So if you're doing a practical and you're doing that online with students, usually if you were doing a face-to-face session with students, they would know what they were going to be assessed on before they got there on the day. They would know what to expect. So in those instances, I would be providing them with the same information and materials that you were doing before. It's just that it's on video camera rather than in the room with you. If it's a situation where you're going to be doing a role play type of thing with them, and you don't usually give it to them beforehand, and you usually give it to them on the spot and say, well, this is the situation, how are you going to react? Well, then obviously you would only give that when you get to that webinar, when they've come on. In terms of other students being there, do what you would usually do in your class. So if you've got an observation and you've got other people in the class during the observation, and it might be your role plays that they're doing as groups, well, you can do that online with all your students at the same time as well, in the groups that you would usually do in class. It's just that they're online instead of physically in the room. So follow your normal processes with that. Now, there's probably other compliance things that we need to consider as well. I think that there's a whole lot of processes that RTOs need to be looking at, refund policies and a whole range of different things. These are some of the things that we need to consider in terms of our assessments being online, but send through any other questions that you've got or comments. And we've got time to go through those now. So I might hand over control back to Trevor, if he's still there.
Thanks, Kerri. Still here.
Yeah.
Surprise visit from my daughter trying to be the mailman. Just quickly turn the video off.
Yep.
If you can pass some control back to
me
as the host, it should be okay.
I'm just trying to find my little stop share.
All right, fantastic.
Hang on, it's hiding behind things.
It's all right.
You got that?
I think so. I'm just going to try. Oh, my video won't start for some reason. That's okay. So, in terms of Q&A, so we've got a few unanswered questions here still. Janine asked sort of fairly early in the session where you had the matrix up. How do you stop yourself from constantly evaluating even after you've implemented? So not saying to stop further improvement, but you tend to want to keep doing it. So just any advice that you can share there, Kerri?
Yes, that's always going to be with everything. It might be like referring to that matrix that we had at the beginning in terms of things being important versus urgent, etc. And looking at, okay, well, let's prioritize these improvements that we find. And it might be that you get to a stage where you're doing a review every 6 months or once a year. There'll always be things that you find. But it's around prioritizing those and thinking, well, we really need to make this change. The unit's had a revision. We're on release 2 of the unit. And it's got this in there, and we really need to make that change. As opposed to, oh, the videos are a bit dark. Still good videos, but they're a bit dark. We could redo that. Working out what the priorities are in terms of, okay, well, no, we can live with that. There'll always be improvements that you can make to everything. It's just working out what you can live with and what you need to change.
Oh, fantastic. Edwina had a question around video making examples. I'm assuming she's probably referring to some tools around making videos. Yes.
So there's a few tools. I tend to use Adobe Spark. So if you want a free tool, Adobe Spark is a good one. If you have a subscription to any of the Adobe products, like if your RTO uses Illustrator or Photoshop or anything like that, then you will have a pro version of Adobe Spark. So easy to make resources. And if you've got that pro version, or even if you don't, you've got the ability to create websites as well. So if there's things for your students that you want to make available on a web page, you can do that through Adobe Spark. Just be aware that it's a public page, but you're not going to be advertising to the whole world that it's there. But that might be a way of getting some materials or resources or links to your students as well if you don't have much of an online presence. The others are Powtoon. That's for making cartoon videos. One that I got, which was quite cheap, was Doodly. And I think Toon, it's also known as Toon on Facebook. So that pops up on Facebook all the time with advertising. I really like Doodly. I've bought an add-on with colour as well. So it's all cartoon. You can do whiteboard explainers and cartoons. Another one I've started using is Biteable. That's for the video ones, or it's animated as well, but it's quite expensive. Otherwise, your lower plans, you're only doing 1 or 2 videos. So it's quite expensive, that one. But the other ones have got free options as well.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Kerri.
But I'll send through that extra handout to send to people.
No, fantastic. Lydia had a question with video training or observations. Do we need a time and a date stamp on the video as valid evidence?
That's a really good question. In terms of the training that you're providing, I wouldn't need to worry about that. If you can do that with evidence that you're collecting as assessment, then that would be really good to be able to do that, depending on the equipment that you've got or the software that you're using. I think a lot of the online meeting platforms allow you to do that in your settings. So, you know, if it's a setting that you've got in your platform, set that, and then that will be there for you to download. And if you've got an LMS and that's being submitted as assessment on your LMS or even uploaded into VETtrack, then that would be showing when that was submitted as well.
Yeah, cool. No, fantastic. And maybe just time for one more. I'm not sure if you've had much experience, Kerri, with podcasts. There's a question around any way to make the podcast files smaller.
I haven't actually done much in podcasting myself. Everything tends to be via video. Janine did make a comment before saying that there was different types of software for podcasting that allows you to reduce the file at the time of creation. And I think that would be the case. Like a lot of video software allows you to export at different sizes so that you can, when you export that video file that you've created, you can go high definition or standard definition. And if you're going with that lower quality, then it will export at a lower file size. So just make sure you're not going for that highest level of quality in file size.
All right, fantastic. All right. Thanks so much, Kerri. I think there was just a plethora of fantastic information there that you shared with the audience. So a big thank you on behalf of everyone for all of that. Just before we wrap up, we've obviously got a few other kind of upcoming webinars. We did touch on one of them, which is a panel that Kerri will be hosting, which is all around trying to help you land on the right e-learning platform for your organisations. There's just so many out there in the market. So Kerri will be hosting a panel next week around that, and be talking to different vendors and asking all of the right questions around helping you choose the right tool. We're aiming for that to be a really interactive session as well. So questions that you might have around choosing the right tool for you, really encourage you to attend that session and ask any of your key questions. Also, I know Kerri's got a whole raft of online bootcamp sessions. So I might just quickly just throw back to Kerri to talk about some of those sessions that she's got up and coming.
Thanks, Trevor. Yeah, I am holding an online learning bootcamp, which is 6 sessions starting next Tuesday. I can send through a link to that. What these are basically are for people who haven't really done much online, or even people who have and they want a refresher on different things. It goes over 3 weeks, so just 2 sessions a week for the 3 weeks to take you through the process of getting online in more detail. It helps you in terms of your webinar delivery, what tools you can use, how to get things up online, and it just gives you the time in between each session to go and have a practice and look at things and come back with your questions and then go on to the next step.
All right, fantastic. So we'll make sure that we get some of that information out to everyone. And that's it, everyone. So just again, big thank you to Kerri for sharing such useful and practical tips. I'm sure we've all come away with a whole raft of things to be thinking about, but hopefully there's some really good sort of practical guides and suggestions around how you can be thinking about taking your content online. We'll shortly send out an email, probably later this afternoon, latest tomorrow morning, with a whole raft of links to the recording, links to some of the guides that Kerri mentioned, and any other sort of relevant content sort of coming out of today. So thanks again, Kerri. Thanks everyone for taking the time to join today. Have a great rest of the day, and look forward to sharing more information with you over the coming weeks.